Good evening, everyone. We'll just wait a couple more moments as people roll in. All right, well, we might get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Andrew Lee. I am the New York Chapter President and Director of Architecture and Planning at Equinox. Thank you for joining us tonight as we investigate virtual solutions that allow designers, clients, and customers to explore the store experience in new and innovative ways. From store development concepts, visual merchandising strategies, and new product experiences in virtual settings, the tools available to retail design professionals are ever growing and becoming more sophisticated. I'm joined tonight by our chapter membership chair and associate principal at CRTKL, Ramon Ocampo.
Hello, nice to meet everybody. I work with the specialty retail sector, and like Andrew said, I am an associate principal at Callison RTKL. I would like to thank our event sponsor this evening, which is AUE. I would also like to thank our chapter sponsors, which are Planet, Chimenti, and Stylemark. Thank you guys so much for your contributions.
And tonight we are very fortunate to be joined by two great leaders within our industry and in this particular segment, Baptiste Martin and also Brian Dyches. Firstly, we would like to welcome Baptiste Martin, who has, over the past decade and a half, been at IWD, which now has an international team of over 10 and a suite of software solutions that offer innovative merchandising and retail technology to over 500 brands globally. So Baptiste, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. So I should start sharing my screen, I'm assuming?
Yeah, and your video.
And my video, okay, yes. There we go. The host has stopped my video, it seems, just so you know. So you won't be able to see me actually, but there we go. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm going to be sharing some of my experience and some of IWD's solution. And here we go. It's just a few slides and a quick video. And here it is. So IWD is a software company that operates within retail. First, we're going to tell you a few words about the company, and then how we saw a digitizing of the merchandising process within retail. And then a little bit of use cases so you can get a better understanding of where do we help our clients focus on within technology and visual merchandising. So indeed, the company operates within 5 offices today, originally from Paris. Then I came to the US in 2008 to open New York. We also opened Los Angeles and also Singapore afterwards. We do have over 100 people helping, actually, not 10, Andrew, to support over 500 brands now with over 30,000 users on our technologies. So where we operate is a suite of three mainly different software that helps visual teams, whether you're a brand, a retailer, to build visual directives and store mapping, store layouts within retail, helping those directives to be delivered down to the field level, helping to implement them more precisely, to build them more efficiently, and to assure compliance. This within the idea of also getting direct feedback from the field team, and allowing to measure the impact of your strategy and then re-communicate back to them. How does this work? And why does it exist also? Well, we know that close to 80% of consumers are finalizing their purchase within the physical store. 70% of clients, they expect to have a personalized experience from the brands in store, as you all know. And the customer satisfaction is boosted by 2 when you have engaged employees within the store. So how do we make sure of this? Well, technology has evolved quite a lot, as we all know, especially in the last decade. Some examples of the renderings we can produce today on an online platform, real-time operating, allow you to produce beautiful quality renderings. So if we do just a tiny bit of history back in the 1840s with the Industrial Revolution, we started to see those large panes of glass being built, and the first ever department store, Le Bon Marché. There it would allow you to have large windows to be merchandising, but also a lot of spaces to merchandise your products in comparison to before. In the 1930s, 40s, we saw some artists such as Andy Warhol or Salvador Dali that would start to actually design some windows within department stores across the US. And then in the 70s, we started seeing the science, we should say, of planogramming coming into supermarkets and really bringing some more science and data behind all this. So some examples of what visual directives could look like and how they have evolved over the years. Hand sketches, as you've seen many times, drawn for visual directives. Something built more illustration within the Adobe suite could look like something like this. Mock-up store or stores taken over by night, and then people photographing and then manually kind of presenting how it needs to be presented and typing in the the SKU number and everything and details on how it should be presented. An example of a planogram. The planogramming software really arrived on the market in the late 90s, and then we came in the early 2000s with a dedicated planogramming software that didn't cater just food, because the luxury market was using the same tools as the food industry. That's kind of how it happened at the beginning. This is an example of how communication happens within retail, where the teams are using a huge amount of platforms and communication tools to communicate from office to field team. And when we mean by field, it's either the stores or it's a district manager overseeing territories and different regions. So they use Dropbox to communicate, to host documents and information that are down to the field. They communicate through WhatsApp, SharePoint, etc. So in the early 2000s, we started building technology around that to kind of centralize in one platform to handle all these needs. This is a quick video that will kind of highlight how this all operates. It's animated. It shows, it's a little bit more dynamic than some stills imagery. So I hope you enjoy it. This is like a variety across 15 industries, from luxury to athletic wear, outerwear, and this will give you a better sense of how this visual merchandising was digitized through these technologies. So, planogramming can be fun today. It's a simple drag and drop, regardless of the industries, with assets on the right, functionalities onto the left. The execution is divided by 5 or 6 times. Using also 3D technology that allow you to virtually merchandise and even dress up mannequins today. It's really stunning how, without necessarily any type of background, you can be a visual merchandiser and merchandising in 2D and 3D and dedicating more time to kind of creativity, still, not reducing the quality of what you're communicating after. Recreating, in a very reasonable time, drawing on top of a floor plan, extracting the walls automatically, and then starting merchandising with your planograms and recreating a store environment to be precise in your communication, to leave more time for your creativity. And we've noticed too many times on various industries how this very process is extremely time consuming, as most of you, I'm sure, know, without using proper technology for that. So before remodeling a store, before a store is even open, you can visualize it. Now mixing, still in that idea of mixing, improving the technology. So what you're doing here is actually mixing the sales data information, how the products are performing in store, by SKU, by category, and then comparing this with the amount of space that you give to these items. So in a way, it's trying to give, to avoid people to look at too many times at Excel spreadsheet to visualize data, but to be more visual and have common tools that people can relate to and visualize. The network piece, which is our other software, is kind of the response to the first one. It's online store database, digitizing the process, centralizing the information in one place. All the pictures that are taken in store of the brands, of the retailer, of the competition, can be centralized into one place. Digitizing the communication can happen through different chats, through apps, etc. And then it's a real-time communication, because we all use real-time communication tools in our personal lives with all the social media, but it's not until not so long ago that we had those in our professional lives. So this was the short kind of video sharing this with you. And then this is kind of a, some quick data on boosting the time efficiencies, building those directives, accelerating also the time to market, in the sense that if the decisions internally are made much quicker, then your time to market to position products in store should be boosted as well. And in the pure creation of those directives, it's up to 80% of the time. Doing something that teams would do in a week, you do them in a day. And some feedback that are really not, towards the team, us, but really towards the technology itself and how digitizing that process helped them, to save time. Yes, we said this many times, but to be consistent in the communication and to really bring detailed information to the store. To plan ahead for the new seasons, but also having a tool where you don't necessarily need any particular graphic design backgrounds to be using it. And yeah, this is it. Thank you.
Great, Baptiste. That was really good to see, and see also that video with everything in motion. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And yes, as I mentioned, we are also joined this evening by Brian Dyches. Brian has served in the past as the International President and Chairman of the Retail Design Institute. And he currently works with brands, developers, and architects to adapt their design standards to maximize their growth needs through the use of new and innovative architectural services. He is the growth director at CorbisStudio USA headquarters in Los Angeles. And I'll leave it to Brian. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everybody from out west. I know you're only seeing my screen at the moment, but we'll keep it this way for a few minutes here. One, it was fantastic hearing from Baptiste, because part of what I do in the industry from the architectural production side is clearly talk about the advantages that are happening around BIM technology. And while Baptiste and his company focus in on a lot of the merchandising solutions, we're very much focused on the actual built environment, the physicality of the documents that we're going to be delivering. Visualization, or virtual stores as we're calling it today, has certainly been a very important part. When I first started working around this industry, I can tell you that a lot of this had to do with renderings and how, Brian, do we take some of these concepts and bring it to reality where materiality and scale is something that we can keep in mind. So for the number of years that I've been involved, and some of you've actually seen me present on virtual reality and have been very involved in the VR, AR community for architecture, is that we began to use different kind of methodologies with virtual reality to create virtual stores. Like Baptiste was acknowledging, everybody today wants to have an idea prior to the investment. How much do we need to spend? Is this going to actually flow in terms of customer journey? Is the usability of this location with the facade, the approaches, the lighting, again, all of the elements that we from the architectural and design community spend a lot of time and effort bringing together. This is a way of checking. Now, a lot of you on this call, I know, very much use SketchUp. And without any disrespect, we kind of consider SketchUp to be great training wheels in order to bring forth at least some level of visualization. But what we're finding, especially with most brands today, as well as developers, is that they want a higher level of reality. In other words, if you're going to show a finish, or you're going to show a particular type of mannequin or even store fixtures, people are expecting a higher level of realization. Why? Look at the gaming industry. The gaming industry has upped the game in terms of level of render, level of expectation. So it's very difficult to show a retail client anything but a higher level of realism. Why did I use the term BIM? Most of you, I think, are familiar, but for those of you who may not, BIM is Building Information Management or Modeling. What I found out, and starting at EuroShop last February, is that there is now a huge movement amongst brands that they want to have data-centric models. If you've not heard about this term, digital twin, please make a note of this. In the world of integrated project delivery that architects are doing today, the digital twin, and that is meaning having a very high-end digital twin to your set of drawings, is something that is extremely being sought after. So let me take it from kind of the outside points of view, talking about virtual reality, what we see happening in retail. Every architect, and this was done by Gensler a few years ago for the Microsoft flagship store in London off of Regent Street. When you choose a location and you're going to pay the type of rents that you're going to do on a high street in London, one doesn't take space planning, merchandise planning, and overall user experience very lightly. It's just too expensive. So the team and what we began a conversation around was, how do you actually begin taking some of the renderings, some of the illustrations, and bring that into a real-time VR engine? A term that some of you may have experienced, but again, I think the majority of people who are seeking answers to visualization today, is that what you're looking for when you're talking to a VR artist who's going to take your concepts, take your renders, is that you've got to be able to go into a high-end VR engine that is going to be able to deliver your ability of not only pulling up the actual experience, and for the most part, I would say that our preference to this day really kind of remains sticking with VR over AR AR is great if it's a pre-built environment and you're just wanting to get a feel of orientation. But virtual reality is very much what I find for the design processes that we want to do. So without getting into too much into the weeds before I get here into BIM, you can see that part of an exercise is always looking at scalability in an environment. When you build a BIM model, you are dealing in the reality of the environment in terms of scale, in terms of how large a video screen may be. You're dealing with exactly what would be seen if you were the average US customer at 5'8". You're looking constantly and saying, what is the user experience throughout the perspectives that I'm going to be dealing with? And that has everything to do with, as Baptiste was talking about, from merchandising depth, presentations. How will your visuals actually look? How will the lighting in this environment actually look? And today's virtual reality environments allow you very much to do that and to be able to be in that kind of state. So let me start my video so everybody can see me now that I am actually live here in California. Part of what I started out saying, and I think this is very much the hallmark of what we deliver as a service around BIM execution plans, is that our clients today, and this happens to be a grocery retailer, some of you may begin to kind of recognize this merchant, but part of what a merchant comes to us to ask for in a virtual environment is that, Brian, one of our biggest problems that we have is coordination, and then we have all of these on-site RFIs that we have to address. Well, the easiest thing to do is to understand that, you know, Revit is a software just like AutoCAD or ArchiCAD software. BIM is a methodology and an approach that we in the design field utilize so that if a merchant is coming to me and saying, listen, we're going to be taking over an existing space, we're going to do a point cloud and have you convert it to a BIM model, what we begin to look at is what is the data of visualization you want in that model. Today, we find more merchants coming to us and saying what we want to do is to be able to build a model so that instead of us waiting on renders to happen, by putting in the data into the BIM model, we're able to immediately walk through the model and to use tablets, use iPhones or mobile devices in order to actually go in and hold coordination meetings with the different disciplines. So you have to think that what's happened in virtual store development today, it's all about data. It's data about not only what flooring materials you're going to be putting into that model, but it's the fixture types, it's taking in the Revit families, moving them into the model. It's understanding that if I am going to build out a mechanical system, you know, how is that mechanical system going to actually interface into that environment? So for some reason, my screen just chose to freeze. There we go. So part of what you guys, I think, need to think about as whether you're in the visual side or whether you're in the store architecture or planning side, is that part of today's uses of technology, like Baptiste showed with his brand, we show from the architectural side, is that when you're building stores, the cost of RFIs, the cost of coordination issues end up being a real nightmare. And I can tell you in this particular merchant, one of their biggest problems is that they will get in, they'll take the environmental graphic design models that someone else developed, they'll take the architectural model, then they'll come together and they never match. The mechanical system is always in the way. So the reason that we're wanting to develop these types of BIM models today is that if you don't have a BIM strategy, you're really taking a lot of risk as a design architect, that you're not going to control the actual outcome. You've got the MEP suppliers, you've got other disciplines that again are not going to be well orchestrated. And I think that's part of the key, is that when you begin looking at clash detection, you begin looking at virtual stores, to us is about pre-construction, solving the problems, so that when our friends at Chimente are going to be building out a store for them, they're not reverting back to us with 5,000 RFIs because it wasn't clear, but there's a very clear intent because the model was built by looking at it this way. Not all architects are into clash detection. We take a very aggressive approach on that clash should be included, and that you've got to be doing this in order to satisfy today's building conditions. So I don't want to deep dive into what is a very technical part of architecture, but one of the things that I'm showing here on this illustration that I think, again, is going to drive home the point. We all know that when we're designing an environment and we've been given an LOD by the developer, and we start to build out that model, how many of you been like me and realize, oh my God, when we get the fixture plan in and we've done very specific millwork elevations, all of a sudden none of that is working. And that's the last thing any of us want to deal with on a job site, is actually taking hacksaws out and cutting metal. Yet that happens. And what we're saying is that with the right BIM strategy, with the right planning, a virtual store becomes, much like Baptiste used the words, it actually becomes very much like what will become reality. So his reality on merchandising is my reality, so that the architect, so that the general contractor, and again, the other consultants are all on the same page. And what we're all building in our respective models, whether it be in CAD or in our case in Revit, we're all coming together and creating a store, so that what we're not looking at, whether it be a brand, whether it be a hospitality client, the last thing we want to start dealing with is value engineering, because these models are in conflict. Or even worse, we're ending up having to go back to the client and go, well, we've now got to move all this ducting work so that all your graphics can work as originally fabricated and planned. And no one wants to be in that case, because the unfortunate reality is, if you work all of this in pre-construction, you save everybody a lot of Malox moments. And I'm old enough now to tell you all that the last thing I want to do is be on a job site trying to figure this out. You just don't get the same intent and quality. So I think, as I kind of wrap up in my last couple of slides, what I also want to say about virtual stores, we happen to think as a company that the future of architectural drawings is UX, user experience driven. So part of what we are calling for, and part of what I loved on the visuals that Baptiste was showing, is that visualization of elements helps to not only sell to your board of directors and other stakeholders who are involved in the process, but it gives all of us a great way of making sure that what's one of the biggest problems facing build out, whether we're in the States, Canada, the UK, wherever, it's that we've got a labor pool today in terms of on the general contracting side that's increasingly not got the level of detail to read architectural drawings. So you'll find that we have a big belief system that the future of the index of drawings is going to be very different than what all of us have been used to for the last 30 years. The sheet turn, when we're doing it, if you think about it, if you're not well trained into what's on those different, A sheets or whatever detail sheets you're on, you're screwed very quickly. And I think that's part of our belief system, is that everything with using a good BIM strategy and building it through data, you're able to do it. And I'll kind of begin to kind of close out with this one example before we open it up to questions. If you think about what we've all lived through for the past 14 plus months, is that one of the biggest things that people would come to me and ask me all the time was, Brian, we don't even know what mechanical systems are in our stores. We have no idea. The state of New York, dictates a particular airflow. How do we go through all those CAD drawings and find it? And I think that's the greatest example we should all learn from, is that without data, infused data into models, we're going to continue to be lost. And I know working in the QSR world, we see it all the time, and them asking us, you know, we don't even know how many square feet of this particular tile spec we have on the floor, and we've had 4 slip and falls, and we have no idea without going back through all those sets and trying to figure it out. So a lot of us who have been involved in trying to solve problems, let me just again tell you that if you begin to think of virtual stores as having a conversation around a digital twin, around BIM planning, a BIM execution plan, you will go a long way in not only solving issues for your client, but making the integration with the general contractor significantly better than would be otherwise. So the last thing I'll end on is, if any of you are interested in learning more about BIM in construction and design, next Tuesday at 11:30 West Coast time, BizNow, B-I-S-N-O-W, we're doing a conversation around BIM and construction. So it's gratis to attend. So if you want to sign up, you just have to go on the BizNow website and go to Los Angeles events, and you can click on and sign up. But thank you, New York chapter, for inviting me to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Great to see. We did lose Ramon due to a technical glitch, but I do want to welcome Baptiste back onto the screen so we can go into some Q&A. What I really liked about seeing both presentations is that we really saw the store environment on 2 different scales, right? From the actual build out of the store and then through to the implementation of displaying product within the store itself. And I think one of our attendees, and I do encourage all our attendees to add any Q&A into the function, but one of our attendees really, summed up a great question in that I think, especially with the BIM models that Brian, you mentioned, do you take that on and adjust that during construction as construction items show up? Does that get transferred as a living, breathing model to like the client, who then is able to utilize software that Baptiste's company then implements, and then it becomes a living, breathing document in many respects?
Well, I mean, that was the original promise of Autodesk, right, many years ago, about what BIM even was, and we had no idea what it was, is that it would be this living document. And it's really taken technology to catch up. I mean, anybody who uses Revit in 360 today understands that technology even 2 years ago wasn't ready for the cloud and models to be hosted. Today, and COVID's proven that out, everything is about a digital model. And so to the question about how you must first, with your client, the number one question I ask a client is, how are you going to use the model, right? If we don't do an LOD planning session, ask them, is this going to be the facilities people using this model, or is it more of a merchandising, and how are we integrating the models? Once we have an LOD planner set up and the conversations at hand, most permit sets are issued at an LOD 300, right? Now, architects will argue in our trade all day long. I'm an interiors guy, not an architect, but what I'll say is that, in our field, no one agrees what an LOD 300 is. And it's why our GC brethren, and sisters see all the time such crazy permit sets, because they're all over the place. And I think that's what you want to do when you're talking, especially to brands today, is find out what is it you need that model to do for you. Then once you begin and set up the BIM standards, figuring it out, who the stakeholders are going to be, then you can really begin to bring the collective together and bring together in a BIM room, is what it's called. That's when you bring the GC in, if they've been determined. It's when you bring the engineer in, or structural, whoever else you want to bring in. Because the more you have a conversation in the beginning, you don't all of a sudden realize that MEP supplier has never built a Revit model before. They're still in CAD, which we know in our industry is very true, right? But what I can tell you, when I go and talk to a big brand or even a medium-sized brand, they're all going like, we go to the NRF, we hear about data, but yet we go to architectural events and we hear people just talk about visuals. And I'm sorry, but our industry has to get on board, because our GC friends online today will tell you that in the VDC world, the GCs are all over virtual design and construction. So architectural world who's worried about the future right now of design build, you have to get on board with data. And that's the key, Andrew, in how you start that process, right? So I know that Justin, if I can just say, also ask about, very familiar with Matterport and you know, all of these different types of camera systems that are capturing environments. What you want to make sure, though, when you're looking at how you're going to go out and build a VR environment, is that it is based off of a Revit model. It needs to have the bones, not just digital visual capture, but understanding, you know, if you're going to actually activate that model and you're going to bring up a configurator tool so I can change finishes on the fly and look at different layout scenarios, then that's very important, because someone, I would think, Baptiste, like you, right? You've got to, the more the environment's known to you and real, the better off I would think your software is, because then that merchant like a Ulta, whoever they may be, really, or Disney, they really get that built environment coupled with your merchandising solution.
Yes, and I think you had a point in saying that you have to use the right model, the right technology, the right quality of rendering for whatever its purpose is. If it's for visual merchandising purposes, you need to recognize the products, and based on I would say the level also of luxury of the industry, your expectations of having something, very realistic, shiny with reflective materials, etc., will be higher than if you're looking into the food industry that needs to just, look at something not as detailed. But yeah, we've seen an evolution where more and more, especially in pandemic time, people are working remotely. They cannot be in mock-up stores. They cannot take over a store physically because the stores are, closed or with limited capacity. They have to work with remote technology. And my opinion is that they also finally took a minute to really think about their internal processes. And when we talk about digitizing the process, whether it's merchandising or store design, to me, they finally took a moment, because as we all know, retail is constantly running, constantly after, new collections and faster, but without sometimes looking at what's happening internally to be more efficient, accelerate the time to market, have people being able to visualize and understand better what's at stake in the projects that you're working on.
What I've seen is our office also uses BIM and Revit as well. I'm working on projects that are in Revit and in BIM. When a brand does have a set standard that the families can be created to reflect those millwork pieces, freestanding units, it can be productive. When the brand is doing one-offs and customization, if they want to see their true reality, it does take a lot of time for someone to model it to the brand's expectation. How do you see ways around that, or do you see things changing with that, or what can be done to fulfill the brand's expectations to see exactly what they're getting, but they want it instantaneous?
Is that called retail?
Yeah.
We always call it fast piano music, and our, compared to working on a multifamily or other segment, right, where it's completely different time frame. I think it goes back into how you originally show them case study samples. And like going out and buying a car, do you want the leather seats or do you want the cloth seats? And I think it's helping clients. It's why SketchUp works so well for some people. And then the reality, right, is that if you really want to start building a database as a searchable database, you as a brand have to begin to commit yourself that you're going to take the existing CAD or sometimes hand drawings, and you're going to do, a laser scan and build BIM models. And you're going to be spending like $2,500 to $5,000 per location to build those models. So at one point, a brand recognizes when I'm paying for all those RFIs and all those issues of coordination on site, don't think you're not paying for it. You're paying multiples. And that's part of the conversation I think our firm world has to have more often is, do you want to feel, in pre-construction where it's cheaper to fix everything, or do you like value engineering and expensive RFIs? I think we know no one will answer in the latter, but isn't it the reality in our industry today? So I say, Ramon, it's about how you build we're so good at building a flash deck to show all our pretty results. We're very bad at, frankly, building a deck in marketing departments to show them why it's important to have a BIM strategy and BIM standards, right?
And Brian, do you then see that as like kind of folding on to brands asking you to look at the existing portfolio of stores that have already been built, that going into them, assessing them and building them as BIM models as well, and not just focusing on stores that are going to be built?
Well, let's say in your case, you have standards. Probably as new locations were built, not all those standards were adhered to. So the first step in that process is to use software to crawl through the drawings and see where standards are in error or applied correctly. So you can pull out reports. So that's the first thing. Is it's like going to the doctor and having an x-ray, right? Do we need a cast or not? And that's part of, I think, the starting process for a lot of brands is to go, how well are we actually in compliance of standards? Because think of how often, just like what we saw last July, right, with new regulations coming in, and here in California, lighting standards and so forth, you need to know where the proverbial holes are in the cheese and architecture, and what is my exposure? Why everybody has errors in emission, right? It's risk avoidance industry. And that's part of, if you don't have data, are you really going to look through drawings every time?
Well, that's what I find really interesting with the product or the software that Baptiste was showing is that you can almost very quickly assess how many SKUs you have within the store, exactly how much product is displayed within the store, and then the brands themselves will already understand the sales per store as well, so they can very quickly assess what stores are performing based on what is sold, and then also use that data to inform them of decisions for new stores as well. And then I guess Baptiste, are you also involved in those earlier conversations and not just the latter ones?
Yes, we are. When we start discussing with a potential partner, there's always kind of an auditing time where we kind of see, okay, what kind of tools are you using? No surprises. There's always like the Adobe Suite and some SketchUp, maybe other 3D design tools. But we're not here to replace any design tools, because our software is not a design tool in comparison with all the others we mentioned. Our software is a pure visual merchandising software. Therefore, as you are building a store map, a store layout, as you are building a planogram, every item that you position comes with data, SKU code, everything being to scale, obviously, markets availability, any additional information. So when you generate all these outputs that you're going to communicate left and right, where you while you work on this online tool with other players around the world, you're sharing a centralized management of the database, making sure everybody's using the same and the right information. But as you mentioned, you're extracting information that is extremely valuable because it's one click and you generate all that data. People are literally typing out those listings today, Andrew. So, it's coming from far. And one of the things that people will tell you is, oh, I can just do one click and magic, and that happens. And then tying in sales, you're right, it's to anticipate. It's either projections of sales, it's either sales from last year. And if it's not a retailer on its own, they're going to assume it based on the sell-in that they sell to retailers if they don't have access to the sell-out. Yeah.
And is there really a dialogue between the visual merchandiser and the merchant buyers as well to understand, like, we only have this amount of this product that can actually be displayed, and you have that dialogue between the two using that software as well?
Yeah, correct, and that's a very good question. There's always a dialogue, and you see it more or less present within different companies. And we try with this technology to kind of have them more, the dialogue exists a little more. So if a merchant has, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet with some availabilities of products for certain types of stores, then the upload of this spreadsheet can be done in the software, and you can see directly the availability of SKUs to build your store. Yes. Or we could tie into existing systems also. Yeah.
Can I just add something about visual merchandising? And I very deeply believe in sustainability and second use of materialities. And I think one of the things our industry must also face in the visual merchandising is that we build all these great assets, but because they're not either built into a Revit family or somehow digitized, all of this stuff goes into a storage area. Sometimes I hate to say the rubbish, but to me, it's one of the most egregious things I think we need to fix in our industry, so that what you're able, by having it digitized, then you have a searchable database of what all your assets are. And unless you guys know something I've missed somehow in our industry, we don't have that, and we don't put enough onus around what is in that database of use, so that we can, again, almost like here in Los Angeles and through the RDI chapter, we've been at several of the movie studios over the years for tours, and their chronicling of their prop assets is amazing. And I've often thought, gosh, if I worked at Saks or somewhere like that, I'd want to know that, because there's such amazing things, literally probably in a basement somewhere, that I could be pulling out. So again, I think digital, whether you're visual merchandising or store architecture, the more data you have, the better you can. And I hate to say it to our industry, the better the board of directors gets us, because I'm sorry, board of directors don't like to hear just about it'll look good, I promise. They want to understand, oh yeah, that prop is going to have 2.7 uses, and I'm going to be able to amortize that investment. We need to talk more like that. So hopefully I'm not crazy saying it.
I think it's all interesting conversations, and I think all the technology has also allowed us, especially during this period of time during COVID, also to like minimize travel. Is site visits as well. Whether it's through the BIM technology to actually help through construction, or whether it's through the merchandising technology to actually implement visual strategies without having people travel across the globe to every single store. It's that in itself also is a huge leap forward, I think.
Yeah, and I think what I hear a lot about retailers is they want to fully integrate the process digitally from the first model that would be passed on from one department to the next. That will be then fine-tuned by maybe a store design team. But once again, to come back to use the right model and the team that has specific skills using the right tools in order to get where you need to go. And if these models, these assets could go from one department and follow the line of, until in-store execution and compliance, then we get to where we want to be.
and also leads to, I think, the life cycle of the store itself. And instead of closing a store and building a whole brand new one, you actually are able to use the data that you do have and potentially look at how can we renovate this store in a way that will work for us better.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, Andrew, and all of us have faced, right? You're on a job site, and let's say that you're a fixture supplier. There's as we're experiencing right now with timber and other materialities, there's a shortage, and we have to substitute the B substitute. We often make decisions without realizing, well, that's a 33% higher cost basis. If we just did air freight, we would be only 11%, and that's the better alternative. We need to make decisions with actual facts, not just that, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And I think that's part of this whole conversation and building a database, is that if you know what you want it for, and I think that especially in rollout brands where they're looking to solve and understand what is in their asset pool, they've got to start building that conversation.
Yeah, totally. One question that we did have from Amy was for visual merchandising students specifically, what kind of software should they be looking into learning to develop, some of these skills?
You could reach out to me, Amy, I would say, because there are, visual merchandising software, as you might probably know, but it's a very niche type of software. And we've been, working on this for, over 20 years now. So there are some visual merchandising software out there for the food industry. And then when you go more luxury and selective, we have the technology that's, across about, I would say, 15 industries now. So anywhere from beauty to fashion, luxury, etc. So, IWD, I would say.
Right, and I guess we're approaching the end, but maybe one final question for both of you. Knowing the software that you have, the technology that you have, do you see an application of that technology or the software that you haven't necessarily dealt with yet? And what could be a fun project or fun typology to apply the technology that you do have and implement it for a new client or a new industry or a new project?
What I would say is the ability to kind of export on any mobile phone some of the 3Ds that you build through the platform, and through that mobile access, being able to transform it into any AR or VR application in order to see a model that's been built for a store, open your tablet, open your phone, and just be able to, let's say in an empty room or an existing one, virtually see what's going on. We actually did quite some projects already with visual reality, where you could be transported virtually into a store, see how it's merchandised, and perform some trainings. Even mixing this with augmented reality, where you could have those handles and kind of move those products around for training purposes, testing out. So these are very exciting technologies, and I just hope to see this applicated in a more democratized way and available for everyone. Yeah.
Brian?
Oh, I would just simply say from CES for so many years that what they call 5D rooms, that is a digital projected model using voice control, will be our future. I think architecture by 2030 will be very digitized. And I think that we're going to see the ability to walk into that model, talk about suggested changes, see clash immediately, solve it. The way we go through a very painstaking process for DDs and CDs needs to be solved, because we all know retail clients want it very fast, DTO, light speed. And I think that's just the reality that we face. And I think that's why technology is our friend. I can tell you firms like Gensler, from being here in LA, next door to them, that, they already have built projection rooms to look at modeling. And so that is going to become de rigueur in, I think, most firms, small ones included, because the price is so low now.
It's exciting times for the entire industry. So,
And students listening in on, seriously, I always say to you, if you have a background in merchandising and architecture, but you can also take some classes in UX, you will own the day going forward. So don't forget UX.
well, gentlemen, thank you so very much. I think this was very informative for everyone who tuned in. And yep, this has been recorded, so will be uploaded online soon. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to our guests, Brian and Baptiste.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Bye.